Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about circles, the radius, diameter, area, circumference, and then we'll might have time to look at another worksheet. If not, we'll make another video. All right, so let's start with some definitions. The center of a circle is the point from which all points on the circle are an equal distance. So if you look at the diagram, we can see the center. The radius of a circle is the distance from its center to its outer edge. So notice this piece right here. That's the radius. The diameter of the circle is the distance straight across the circle through the center. It is twice as long as the radius. So if I had to, I would put diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. If the diameter is equal to 2 times the radius, then the radius is equal to a half times the diameter, or half the diameter. The circumference of the circle is the distance around the outside of the circle. When we think about shapes that have sides, like actual sides, we call the distance around it the perimeter. But a circle doesn't have sides. Therefore, instead of calling it the perimeter, we call it the circumference. It is the distance outside the circle. Perimeter is the distance outside a shape that has sides, like a square or a rectangle or a triangle. The formula for circumference is pi times diameter or 2 pi times radius. These formulas are the same thing because remember, diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. If the diameter, I have some examples we can talk about. If the diameter of a circle is 4 centimeters, the circumference is 4 pi centimeters because circumference is found by doing diameter times pi. And the diameter in this case is 4 times pi. We'll leave the pi there instead of trying to calculate it because we'll be doing these problems without a calculator. All right, here's another example. If the radius of a circle is 5 centimeters, the circumference is 2 times pi times 5. So really, I can write it with parentheses because we're using this formula. 2 times pi times radius. And then we can go ahead and multiply the 2 and the 5 together, and we'll get 10 pi. Now, remember, if your radius is 5 centimeters, that means your diameter is 2 times 5, which is 10. And using this formula, that's pi times diameter to get circumference, which would be 10 times pi. Same answer. All right, let's do some together. Complete the chart for each circle described below. We'll do a few and then we'll move on to the next section. So for number 1, they tell us the radius is 2 meters. Well, if the radius is 2 meters, what is the diameter? Remember, diameter is equal to 2 times radius. So that's 2 times 2, which is equal to 4 meters. What is the circumference? Well, circumference, I have 2 formulas I can use. I can use pi times diameter, or I can use 2 pi times radius. Either way, I'll end up with pi times 4 if I use the first formula, which is the same as 4 pi. Or if I use the second one, it will be 2 pi times the radius, which is still 4 pi. For number 2, they give us a diameter. They tell us the diameter is 18. Well, remember, radius is a half times diameter. It's the diameter in half. And if my diameter is 18, then the radius is 9. So then I can find circumference using either formula. And that should be pi times 18, which is 18 pi. Or if I use radius, 2 times pi times 9, which is still 18 pi. All right, let's try number 3. Now they tell us our diameter is 9.2. Well, I can go ahead and calculate their circumference using diameter, because that'll just be pi times diameter, which is 9.2, and we'll leave pi in our answer, so this is just 9.2 times pi. In order to calculate circumference with radius, I have to actually calculate the radius. Well, that means I want to do a half times diameter. But doing a half times diameter is the same as saying take the diameter and divide by 2. Diameter divided by 2. And we get 4.6 millimeters. And then I can use the circumference formula with radius, and I will get 2 times pi times 4.6. But we see that that's the same as saying 9.2 pi. So either one works. All right, let's look at number 4, and then let's move on to the next section. In number 4, they give us the radius, which is 5.5. We can go ahead and calculate circumference using it. It would be 2 times pi times the radius, which is 5.5. So then we get to do 5.5 times 2, and that's the same as saying 11. So this is 11 pi. Now let's go ahead and calculate the diameter. Remember, diameter is 2 times the radius. So that's 5.5 times 2, which is 11. So the diameter is 11. So if I had the diameter, I can calculate the circumference by just doing pi times the diameter, which is 11, and this is 11 pi. So either way, both work. I tell you what, since I have, all right, I'm back. Since I have for number 8 a mixed number, let's do number 8 before we move on. Now we're given a radius of 3.5. Let's calculate the circumference using the radius formula first. So that's 2 times pi times 3.5. Now, in order to multiply with a mixed number, I need to turn it to an improper fraction. So this is really 2 times pi times 7 over 2. Remember, multiply 3 times 2 plus 1, keep the diameter. 3 times 2 plus 1, keep the diameter. And I get 7 over 2. Now this 2 has a denominator of 1. So we multiply numerators together, multiply denominators together, and we end up with 14 pi over 2, which is 7 pi. Now, let's try to find the diameter. Remember, diameter is 2 times radius. So that's really 2 times 3.5. Now, of course, I can turn it to an improper fraction and multiply, but 2 times 3.5 is really the same as saying 3.5 plus 3.5, which is 7. So this is 7. The diameter is 7. If I wanted to do it the multiplication way, I would have to turn my mixed number to an improper fraction again. The 2's really cancel out and leave me the 7. Or I can multiply the numerators together, the denominators together, and then simplify. But either way, I get 7. So we can find the circumference using the diameter formula, and that's pi times 7, which is 7 pi. All right, now let's move on. All right, we're still going to work with circumference, but now they're giving us the actual circles, okay? So let's remember that circumference can be found by doing pi times 2 times radius, or 2 times pi times radius, or it can be found doing pi times diameter. We're going to leave our answers in exact form. That means we're leaving the pi. Let's do a couple of these before we end the video. So it says, find the circumference of each circle. For number 1, they've given us diameter. I'm sorry, they've given us radius. Since they have given us radius, we'll use the radius formula. Remember, the radius formula is 2 times pi times radius. So this is 2 times pi times 5, which is 10 pi centimeters. All right, let's look at number 2. Number 2, they gave us the diameter. And since they gave us the diameter, we'll use the diameter formula. Pi times diameter. Circumference equals pi times diameter. So this is pi times 9, which is just 9 pi. In our third example, they've given us radius. Radius equals 5.6 yards. Well, I'm going to use the formula that involves radius. 2 times pi times radius. 2 times pi times 5.6. So we'll do 5.6 times 2 off to the side. Or it's the same as saying 5.6 plus 5.6. But either way, we get 11.2. And don't forget to attach the pi and put my units on these. So that's very straightforward. If they give us radius, use the radius formula. If they give you diameter, use the diameter formula. You have 2 formulas to find circumference, depending on what you're given. You do not have to calculate diameter in order to find the circumference. And you do not have to calculate radius in order to find the circumference, because you have 2 different formulas. Let's do a few more. So in our next 3 examples, I'm given radius for the first one, radius for the second, and diameter for the last. So watch. 2 times pi times 2.5. Well, that means 5 pi. Put my units on it. This is 2 times pi times 20, which is 40 pi, with my units. And then the last one is just pi times 10.5, because I was given diameter, which is 10.5 times pi. Don't forget your units. Okay, so hopefully this video has been helpful in understanding the relationship between diameter and radius, and how both can be used to find circumference. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.